But here's the issue for most of our organizations. We work with companies of all sizes and all kinds of industries, and we see this played out time and time again. Our organizations have not been set up to really think. As a matter of fact, in most cases, they can't think. One of my favorite TED Talks is by a lady by the name of Margaret Heffernan. And she tells the story of Alice Stewart, a really interesting lady from the 1950s at Oxford. She was interesting for all kinds of reasons. First of all, she was a successful female doctor, which in the 1950s wasn't all that popular. Secondly, she continued to work after she had kids, and she was really, really smart, and she was sort of breaking all of the trends. And she was also very interesting because she was involved in a brand new field of study, which was studying the patterns of diseases to understand where they come from and how they can be prevented. Now, she knew that if she was going to make her mark, she had to pick a field of study that would, where there was a big need. So she chose childhood cancer.
Wow.
Now, in that day, and to this day, it remains true that most diseases, there's a huge correlation between poverty and the spread of disease. Isn't that true? Yet in her case, as she began to research childhood cancer, she realized that the percentage of children coming from affluent families, that there were more of them getting childhood cancer than those coming from poor families, which didn't make any sense at all. And so she began to research this and spent years doing it, only to discover that what was causing it is that the affluent families who could afford medical care, pregnant women were getting x-rayed. And the x-rays were causing the cancer. Now, her findings, she published them very quickly. She thought it would be welcome news. We can stop, and lower this rate of death in infants and small kids. But it wasn't well received at all. It flew in the face of, first of all, this sexy new technology at the time called x-rays. It flew in the face of the medical establishment. No one wanted to listen to her. They all thought she was crazy. You'd think that a finding like this would have been embraced. It took her a full 25 years.
Wow.
Before the American and British medical societies looked at her findings and accepted the fact we've got to change our ways, and they stopped x-raying pregnant women. Now, during that time, how many think that Alice Stewart had an uphill battle? You better believe it. Everywhere she went, people told her she was crazy. So she developed a really interesting model to make sure that her thinking was solid. She hired a guy who worked with her, whose name was George. He worked in statistics. Where Alice is, the story is told she was gregarious and outgoing and life of the party. George was not that. He would be much happier spending the evening alone at home with a spreadsheet than talking to a human being. But this was his job. His job was to disprove her findings. He spent every moment of every day at work trying to prove his partner, Alice, wrong. And she calls this, Margaret Heffernan refers to this as a brilliant way of collaborative thinking, because in most cases, we don't have true thinking partners in our businesses. We have echo chambers. People that just echo to us the same BS we're telling ourselves, people that will tell us what we want to hear, because in most organizations, you start asking hard questions, you are asking for trouble. Isn't that true?
Yeah.
But what the story tells us is that if we're really going to break away from the everyday, building an ordinary business that doesn't stand out and doesn't do anything special, if we're going to break away from that and begin to do something really different and really powerful, we're going to have to develop those thinking partners who are going to challenge the way that we think and ask us hard questions and hold our feet to the fire so that the genius that is inside of us can be released upon the world. Does that make sense?